Hello and welcome to another episode of Starside Chats. I am your host, Aaron, one of your hosts, and with me is another of your hosts, Zach. How's it going, Zach?
Pretty good. It's been a while since we last recorded.
Yes, we skipped a week, but we're back, and we're here to talk about episode 66 of Starside Chat.
Where there's kind of a lot to talk about, especially considering Sony's latest announcement, but also just like some cool news that has happened since the last time we talked.
And frankly, some not cool news.
Yes, and also some not good news.
Tell me all about Sony's announcement.
Well, so there are multiple ones. The first one is that PlayStation has bought Jade Raymond's new studio, Haven Studio. So this was the person that was going to make, it was like an Uncharted Star Wars game with EA, and then she left, and that project, I guess, got scrapped, and now she's making her own studio, and she used to lead the Assassin's Creed games, I think, at one point. And so yeah, she's working on a new IP, and it's now probably going to be a PlayStation exclusive. So the arms race for buying up studios has not ended. I
was just about to say that. It seems like every couple of weeks we get another acquisition news story that comes out.
Yeah.
And really, it was just Microsoft for a while, but now Sony is basically like, man, I really got to catch up, because Microsoft was just like constantly purchasing stuff, it seemed like, for a number of years.
Yeah. So Microsoft bought a whole bunch of, I feel like it's going to be a while before you go, okay, Microsoft needs to buy another studio to keep up with Sony, just because
they're so far ahead.
The purchase of Activision was such a big one that they can sit on their hands for a little while.
This isn't in our show notes, but there was a State of Unreal that happened this week. I think it was a miniature live stream that happened on like Thursday. And they just went over just like what is it to develop in Unreal and whatnot, and like how far can we push it? And they talked about that like Matrix thing that came out a couple months ago. But also, I guess CD Projekt Red, they also, previous to the State of Unreal thing, they talked about how they're using Unreal Engine 5, which is the latest and greatest Unreal Engine, to make the new Witcher game.
Yeah, I don't know how excited you are for another Witcher game, but it's
not a lot.
Yeah, I didn't play any of the previous ones. I do have access to it. I feel like it was maybe a PlayStation Plus title at one point.
I'm sure.
And, but yeah, I've just not gotten around to it. But I like the show on Netflix. So
CD Projekt Red, I think a lot of the problems that Cyberpunk had was that they were developing the engine alongside with the game at the same time. Famously, that happened to Anthem, and it was not a great time for Anthem.
It pretty much never seems to work out when you're like building the tools as you're making the game. So
the fact that they're switching over to Unreal, I also read an article about how this vastly increases the like depth and breadth of people they can hire, because everyone is familiar with Unreal Engine, and so if you're making a game, you can just put on like LinkedIn or whatever, must be proficient in Unreal, instead of must be proficient in our custom game software that you'll have to spend the first couple months learning.
The Frostbite engine that is not built to make any of the games you want to make.
Which I don't think, did they actually end up retiring that after what a travesty that was, or is stuff still made in Frostbite?
I don't know, actually. I think they've definitely gone away from the directive of all games must be made in Frostbite, but
yeah, what a foolish idea that was.
Yeah, they're like, it looks great, it makes some really great environments, but it was like built to be this like first-person shooter, like multiplayer, like an engine to make those types of games. And so then everybody had to figure out how to make like a Madden football game with that, or how to make like a big expansive RPG with it. And it's just like, it was not designed for this. So you have to build the tools to make the game work on top of like trying to make the game itself. And it, of course, has led to nothing but like disastrous games. So
they showed some pretty cool stuff. I just like skipped through the State of Unreal. And one of the things they showed was like basically a brush that this guy was using. I'm sure there are like configurations he had to do beforehand, but there was basically a blank field and he was able to just use a brush to kind of roll over it, and it generated a battle scene with like NPCs that were in the midst of fighting each other. And it was all like procedurally generated, which was crazy to see.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But interesting stuff. If you're interested in Unreal Engine 5, it's free. So you can just download it and start using it. There's a million YouTube videos about how to get started in Unreal that are free. So if you're interested, I would say like the two things you can check out are Unity and Unreal are the two giant ones. Unity seems even more open source and good as far as like, or easier to use, I should say. But I guess I don't really know about Unreal Engine 5. Maybe they upped the usability of it to compete with Unity. But it's great that Unity and Unreal Engine 5 are free if you just want to tinker around with it. It's like, I feel like a really cool way to dive in. I guess I paid for RPG Maker 2000 back when I was in like high school and had a lot of fun making RPGs. But if this was available when I was in high school and I just like started downloading Unreal Engine like demos and learning from them, I feel like that's a really great path to start being.
Yeah, I was going to say, you'd be a game developer by now if you'd done that.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of developing games, there's some bad news that we need to talk about. And I don't want to say I called it because I didn't want to be right about it, but it seems like...
I feel like every time we brought it up, you did aptly say, like, I do not believe this is happening.
I just did not believe that it was going to come out this year. We're talking, of course, about The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2, or the sequel to Breath of the Wild. It's not named yet, but I did kind of call it. I did not want to be right about it, but it's been delayed to 2023, so it's coming out, spring 2023, they said?
Hopefully. I mean, it could come out on the anniversary of Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a possibility. Everybody's like, well, maybe they specifically delayed it to give them a little bit more time to get a Switch Pro along with it. Maybe that's partially why. I mean, probably not, but it's, it's fun to think about getting new hardware along with it, especially if it's going to be like a beefier Switch model. But also, it rules out the fact that people are going to be debating the merits of Elden Ring versus Breath of the Wild 2 for Game of the Year.
Yeah, that's the main sentiment. All the game journalists I follow on Twitter were just like, this is a bummer, but also not that much of a bummer because we have Elden Ring, and that can just dominate the Game of the Year discussions. We don't have to have like competing open worlds. But I would say to that, these people have forgotten the Starfield.
I was going to say, I was going to throw two out there. One, you got Starfield that we don't know much about yet, and potentially still God of War Ragnarok is still on the table. So,
yeah, maybe. I feel like that's also primed to be done.
I mean, I agree with you. I think it probably will also end up being delayed to 2023, but I mean, it's not off the table just yet. And so there's still a chance that people are debating Starfield, Elden Ring, and God of War Ragnarok.
I will reserve judgment about if Starfield is actually going to release. I think I'm hopeful right now, but I really want to see. I do believe they are going to do some sort of deep dive in the first part of June.
Yeah. It depends if they do that, on whether they do that or not and how in-depth it is.
If they do that, I feel like it is highly likely that it will come out this year. But if they don't do that, and if we still get this like slow... We were texting about this, because they released like a minute-long video that was just like, here's Vasco, here's your robot. We were talking about how slowly they're leaking information. Not leaking, but just like this slow drip of information we're getting over like months and months and months, which that part does not make me hopeful. The fact that it's happening so slowly, but
I mean,
I'm banking on that hour long deep
think
dive, and if that happens, I think we're
that's
in good
what
shape.
I'm really looking forward to. But you're right. If they end up not doing much with that, or if it doesn't end up being the big like deep dive that we're used to seeing from like just months before a big Bethesda release, I think that might be pretty telling that they're not gonna make the November 11th release date that they have. But I think last we've heard, they said that it's still on track to release on that day. So hopefully they're able to do it, because it's definitely the thing I'm most looking forward to this fall. And without it, I kind of don't know what to be excited about for this fall.
Good question. I mean, there will also be a Nintendo Direct, hopefully, in June. And they will talk about games coming out in the last half of the year.
I mean, we already know.
And hopefully there will be some big
they
surprises.
have a Pokemon game coming out this fall.
Yeah, that'll be
That's
great.
about the only thing we know. I'm trying to think of what else might be planned.
I'm still holding my breath for Silksong. If Silksong comes out this year, I think there's a very high likelihood it will be my game of the year. Maybe even beating Starfield. It depends. Just I still am so in love with Hollow Knight, but we'll see if that even comes to fruition.
Yeah.
In the same vein as Hollow Knight, though, let's talk about another indie game, Hyper Light Drifter, which I love and have bought on like every platform. A great game, and they just revealed. We were not as hot on Solar Ash. I think both of us kind of dropped it pretty quick, but they had a reveal for Hyper Light Breakers, which is a more direct, but it's not a direct sequel to Hyper Light Drifter, but it's more of a sequel than Solar Ash, which was more of a spiritual sequel. It's co-op. It seems to be some sort of third-person action game. There was like a snippet of what I think is actual gameplay, and there's some screenshots you can find on like the Steam page if you look, but it seems more in the vein. It's not pixel art like Hyper Light Drifter. It's more in the vein of Solar Ash, but
yeah, it looks
interesting. I get like Risk of Rain 2 vibes almost. Have you ever played Risk of Rain 2?
I never played those games. No.
Risk of Rain 2 is pretty fun, but that's the kind of vibe I get from it. And then there's also going to be a Netflix show, I guess, set in this world, which I'm pretty excited. What do you think about this?
It kind of looks like Solar Ash, but they set it in the world of Hyper Light Drifter, which I'm not sure if that's a mistake or not, to go away from the gameplay style of Hyper Light Drifter.
I think a thing that I liked about Hyper Light Drifter, which was lacking in Solar Ash, and I think would have made it better, is the Metroidvania of it all. Like in Hyper Light Drifter, you were like making your sword stronger, you were getting different sword techniques, you were getting different equipment, you were collecting things that let you become more powerful and also traverse things more interestingly. In Solar Ash, I think you could change your outfit, but I never really felt like I could purchase things that made the gameplay different or made me better at combat. It was all just very floaty, and you basically locked on to stuff and then zipped toward it. And hopefully they took that. I don't know if there was that feedback that they heard, but I think what's going to make or break this game, Hyper Light break this game, is if the combat is good. And because the combat in Hyper Light Drifter is so solid, and I can play that infinitely. I want that to transition to a 3D world more so than just an iteration of what they did in Solar Ash.
Yeah, and I will say, I think you and I are sort of in the minority of just not vibing with Solar Ash among the people who did play it. Most people seem to like it, so I doubt if they got that sort of a feedback, but
yeah.
But yeah, it's possible that this is just like a third-person action game version of what they did with Hyper Light Drifter. Or it's also possible that this is just like in the same universe, and obviously playing on the name a little bit for like similarity's sake, but it's also possible that this is just like more of even an open world RPG type of a game.
I don't know. I can't get a good vibe for it.
And they could still return to Hyper Light Drifter and do a Hyper Light Drifter 2 proper that is still that more isometric view.
Oh my god. What a dream that would be for me.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like nothing's quite off the table with that. But yeah, you really can't tell exactly what they're going for with it just based on the few screenshots that we have available just now.
Hopefully Summer Games Fest, Jeff Keighley's Summer Games Fest, will actually have events where there will be reveals. I feel like the last couple of years I've been a little unimpressed with Summer Games Fest because it's so stretched out, and like things will be happening and then you'll hear about a thing, and then like later that day on Twitter you'll see Jeff Keighley being like, hey, this thing is part of Summer Games Fest, just FYI. I'm also part of this. And it just seemed just like not super well organized. The reason I love E3 so much is because it's so contained. It's like 3 days of just like, or not even 3, it's like a week of constant like, here's everyone stepping up to the plate and showing us what you have. And I hope there is some kind of thing in early June where people do kind of get together and say, well, here's a showcase, and they can tell us more about stuff. I don't know.
It is harder with the format that they've gone to because they're not doing like on stages, like press conferences, the way E3 used to be. Like that is what made it so like contained energetic, and what made it so like such a big presentation thing. Now it's just like a bunch of different companies made Nintendo Direct style like streams that you can watch, and then in between them Jeff Keighley pops in and goes, remember, this is part of Summer Games Fest, and then it just goes to the next video that otherwise you would have no clue, like, oh, this is part of that thing.
Here's a Muppet to tell you to drink gamer fuel.
Yeah. I feel like he needs to put that Game Awards stage to good use and just get some people to come out and do actual like proper E3 style press conferences the way they used to.
He's got to be pretty pumped at least though that he's now basically the only game in town. Like now that E3 is gone, pretty much the only gaming event that matters is the Game Awards. Like he's so good at getting those revealed, even though I would say like the last year and like maybe the last 2 years have been a little lackluster as far as like world premieres. I'm definitely always going to tune into that because of the world premieres and the interesting things that he can, finagle to be that one more thing.
Yeah.
And now that E3 is canceled, they say they're supposedly going to come back in 2023.
Yeah.
They're refocusing and they're going to spend all their efforts on next summer. So who knows if it will actually return. I think there is enough nostalgia associated with it. Enough people in the industry have fond memories of E3 that they could, even though the ESA is a bad organization that people hate, I think they could, put something together in 2023 and say, like, this is the new E3. Because I do know that it's like, it is a good thing to have. You always hear those stories about developers going to E3 and meeting and they're making these connections, and that's how games get made. Is like indie devs come there and they get their games shown. Like a journalist finds an indie gem and it suddenly explodes just because they got the coverage at E3. I don't think it's bad. I think the ESA is not good, but I don't think it's bad to have E3. I think it's good, actually, is my opinion.
And when it comes down to it, like, I'm fine if, like, Summer Games Fest just kind of, like, steals the limelight and becomes the big summer, like, games showcase for everyone and, like, puts on a similar, like, conference where developers can get their game seen and, like, meet and interact with other people and start, like, building those connections and stuff like that. But yeah,
it just needs to be more contained. You got to wring that towel out and get all that liquid into a single cup.
Yeah, it's true.
I don't want like a Bethesda show press conference in June and then in like the second week of August an EA Play.
Yeah, that's like, what happened last year.
That's not what I'm looking
for.
For.
There was like a handful of them that all happened like the first week of June, and then EA showed up and like towards the end of July, and we're like, oh yeah, this is our summer thing that we could have done like a month and a half ago, but nope. But yeah,
it makes it much more fun if it's all in 1 week.
for sure. And I mean, I suspect that there would have been an E3 this year, but like COVID started spiking like right about the time that they probably would have been like planning all of it. And so they were like, okay, well, like we can't foresee that things are going to return to normal and things are going to be better. Because like right now you look at it and you go like, there's no reason they couldn't do an E3 right now. Like everybody's dropping their COVID restrictions. Like everything's fine now. But, at the time that they were planning it, that was not the case. So chances are...
Oh, yeah, that was still when Omicron was happening.
Yeah, so chances are they looked at that and they were like, we're just going to cancel for now. And we'll plan on being back next year. But, I mean, they always run into the... This is the thing. Like, they always run into the possibility that it could spike again this time, like that same time next year. But at some point, they're just going to have to, like... do it, like bring back E3, like it'll be fine.
That's gonna be the hashtag, man.
Yeah, maybe it will be. Maybe I started something.
What's this Game Pass? You're subscribed to Game Pass. What's this Game Pass news?
Well, it turns out Microsoft is moving ahead with an Xbox Game Pass family plan. This we have this story from Windows Central. They were talking about how you're finally going to be able, if you've got like multiple people in your family that want to be subscribed to Game Pass, but you don't want everyone, you don't want to pay for like a bunch of separate subscriptions, you can now do a family plan, which I think is a little surprising it wasn't already here, but about time.
We're kind of family, aren't we, Zach?
Oh, we are, I guess. Does that mean you want access to my Game Pass?
I don't know. I wonder what the limit on that will be. Like, how many people constitute a family, and can family live in different states?
It's weird. Like, Game Pass kind of doesn't have a thing where you can have multiple profiles. I mean, obviously this family plan is going to like solve this, but like previously it wasn't like Netflix where you could just like share your account with somebody and they could just have multiple accounts multiple profiles within one account. So like thinking about it from like a movie or TV like streaming setup, there was really no option there. So they definitely needed to do this family plan for sure.
While we were on break, April 1st happened, and I wanted to put this in here. The guy who made A Short Hike released an unofficial multiplayer mod. I read on Twitter that he originally was like, oh, it'd be funny to make a battle royale version of Short Hike, but that ended up being too much work. So he just basically created these servers, which he said he would keep live for like the next 2 or 3 weeks. But if you downloaded this mod, you could basically drop into A Short Hike and there would be up to 99 people just running around randomly. And I saw some gameplay of it, and it seemed pretty fun. But I think the servers, they might still be active, actually, if you're interested and you have this on Steam. I have it on Switch, so I cannot play this. But it seemed like a cool little thing. The developer of that game is super fun, and I hope he is doing more stuff in the future similar to A Short Hike, because I loved it, but it was indeed short, and I wanted more of it.
The sequel will be called A Long Hike, and it'll just be a longer
I hope that is the case. I would love that. Because I like everything about that game except for the length of it. I got every golden feather. I played around, and since I had the Switch version, they had extra stuff. They added like that boat race or whatever. It was a good time. But I can't say enough good things about A Short Hike except for it was short.
I've not played it, but I have listened to the soundtrack, and it's pretty great.
Soundtrack is great. The graphics, that whole style, that like retro, almost N64 style is just like it, injected directly into my veins. I love it.
Well, speaking of indie games that we like a lot, Nobody Saves the World is coming to PS4 and PS5 on April 14th. So that's the week that this podcast is going up. I already played this on Game Pass because it is... I want to say it was a timed exclusive for Xbox, and that's why it's just now releasing on PlayStation. I don't know if this is on Switch, but That would be like an ideal
It's-
place
I
to
mean-
play. I mean, any indie
Yeah.
game is like ideal for the Switch, but also if you have Game Pass, you can play it right now, and you should. It's very good. I'm not sure where this will land on game like end of the year list. Obviously, because we got a lot of other stuff to play before that, but I like
Sure.
it a lot, and I feel like it will make my list. It came out so early. It's one of those games that you always worry about forgetting because of recency bias with other games and stuff like that. But it's very, very good. I highly recommend Nobody Saves the World.
Yeah, this was like, wasn't this like the first or second week of January? I feel like it was the first big news story
Yeah.
of January. Was this game came out of nowhere and it's amazing?
Yeah, it was definitely like mid-January, and like everybody was talking about it because it was also like, if not the first, it was definitely one of the first like 2022 games, and so everybody was talking about it all at the same time. And so I saw that it was on Game Pass, jumped right in, and I was like, "Yep, they're right. This is really good."
A couple weeks ago, I talked about that Kickstarter, the most successful Kickstarter now, that Brandon Sanderson Kickstarter, where he was like, hey, I secretly wrote a bunch of books and you should all subscribe to my Kickstarter. It's not a subscription, but interesting way to sell books. And he is such a prolific writer. He just is constantly pumping these things out. And I guess From Software took notice because they were like, hey, we wouldn't mind working with Brandon Sanderson. And maybe it was that he said this and then they were like, yeah, sure. I'm not sure the chronology of what happened, but Brandon Sanderson was basically like, hey, I have a Soulsborne pitch, which who knows what that means. But maybe they will decide that Elden Ring 2 is all about Brandon Sanderson and kick George R. R. Martin to the curb.
Yeah, I mean, I like the lore quite a bit in Elden Ring. Like, the more I play the game, the further I get into it, the more I'm like looking up those lore videos and the more fascinating I'm finding all of it. And so it makes sense that they would want to go to, if they can't work with George R. R. Martin again, or maybe they just want to do something else like in a different universe altogether, find another like prolific fantasy writer and have work with them on like another like similar concept where you have somebody write the lore and characters, and then FromSoft comes in and like adapts it to a video game.
What do you think is next for From? Do you think they do an Elden Ring 2? Is this the new franchise, or do you think they just pivot again and do something completely different?
It's hard.
I feel like Elden Ring is so successful.
Yeah, it's hard to say because Elden Ring is far and away their most successful game.
Yeah.
And there's so many like good things about it in terms of like evolving their formula that it's hard to say, like hard as a fan of the game to say, oh, they're gonna definitely pivot and go do something else again. But I mean, you could have said the same with like Bloodborne and Sekiro, where they're like, oh, this is a cool, interesting new path. Are they going to carry this forward with Bloodborne 2 or Sekiro the sequel? And they obviously did not do that, or haven't done it yet. I mean, maybe they still do.
Yeah.
Maybe the next game in the From Software library is just Bloodborne 2. But
the crazy thing about Bloodborne is it never came out for anything except for PS4, I think.
I think you're right. I was going to say, did it not come out on PC? Because I know like Sony has been like slowly sort of porting more stuff to PC, but I think you're right. I don't think Bloodborne did make it to PC.
Which is crazy. I watched my brother play a lot of that game, and it was very good. I enjoyed watching him play it.
I was going to say, like, as I've been playing Elden Ring, it's got me, like, curious to go maybe check out some of their other games. And like, that's the one for sure that I would, like, I'm kind of eyeing as, like, once I finish Elden Ring, if I don't just immediately start playing it again in New Game Plus, I might try to download Bloodborne and play that. But I don't know. Maybe I'm more of a Soulsborne person now. It's hard to say.
It could be.
But either way, like, do you think it's a mistake to pivot from Elden Ring with all the success they've had? Like,
I mean, the thing about Elden Ring is it's so massive.
Yeah.
Like, people are still finding secrets and like still unlocking areas. Like, it's going to take a lot of work to make an Elden Ring 2 because the world is so dense and full. I don't know. If the next thing is Elden Ring 2, it's going to be years in the making.
For sure. I mean, I have watched a lot of like Dan Tack streams where he's been playing through the game. And of course, he writes for Game Informer. And he said that he, like, at least initially, he said he might be surprised if they did Elden Ring 2. Like right away,
Really?
anyway. Like, not that it's out of the question for the future, but like as the very next project they do, just because it was such a massive undertaking.
Yeah.
That it's just like maybe they need like a palate cleanser before they.
That's what I was
return
thinking.
to
They
it.
made it like a smaller game.
Yeah, I'm kind of actually.
But who knows?
I mean, this might sound crazy, but I'm a little curious what they would do with more of a Metroidvania style game. Like, what if FromSoft pivoted in a way nobody expected and did like a 2D Metroidvania?
I'd be into that. I gotta say, Metroidvanias are where it's at now for me. Hollow Knight has stolen my soul. I love it so much. And I think about Silksong every day. When I'm bored at work, I Google Silksong news, and there's never anything. There's two things that always come up. There's on the Silksong subreddit, there's someone who's teaching himself like math equations every day until Silksong is released. So I always see the new one of those. And then there's also a Twitter account that is like, or no, it's a YouTube account about Silksong news. And every day they post like a 30-second video that's like, there is no news today. But they do it every day.
Yeah, I think you should check out Grime, because as I'm thinking about it, I think Grime is just the, like, what it would be if FromSoft made like a 2D Metroidvania.
Oh, that's a good pitch.
So definitely check out Grime. That's coming to Switch later this year too. So
now that is going to get me to buy it, I have to say. If I can play that on my TV, there's no hands
I mean,
down,
you can play it on your TV because you've got Stadia, and that.
Oh yeah, I forgot it's a Stadia exclusive or
console. I don't know if it's actually out on anything else right now. It probably is. It's on PC, I'm sure. Right? It has to be.
I don't know.
Maybe not. I don't know. For sure, it's like a console exclusive for Stadia for now. But
speaking of being on PC only, what's your history with the Monkey Island games?
Well, I have no history with it. I've heard quite a bit about them, and I am interested in this news. But I know you know more about it than I do.
Only a little bit. I've watched a little bit of a playthrough of one on Twitch, and I started the first one because I was like, oh, point-and-click adventures. I remember having fun with these. Mm-hmm. I'll play with my girlfriend. And so we started playing the first one, and we got to a point where we just could not figure out how to progress, which I think is a theme with these games. Like, you get a bucket and, like, a ham sandwich and, like, a pair of roller skates, and you basically just, like, go to every interactable item and like see if you can interact with them with every one of your items. And we got to that point where we weren't really sure. We were just like clicking around randomly, and we could not figure out how to, I think, like get someone to move or get like a boulder to go out of the way or something. So we basically stopped. But I appreciate these games, and I like watching someone who knows what's going on play them, where there's not like gaps in gameplay where they're trying to figure out like, oh, what do I do with this toothpaste? And so, yeah, the developers, I actually don't remember who announced this, but I think some of the people who were originally part of... Oh, it was Devolver. That makes sense. Devolver Digital was basically like, hey, guess what? We're making another Monkey Island game. It's going to pick up directly after the last one, which I think is LeChuck's Revenge.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And so get ready for that. We've been making it in secret during quarantine, and it's
coming this year.
It's coming.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with this type of game, like the point-and-click adventure. The one I've played most recently is actually pretty recent. Beyond a Steel Sky is sort of a point in, like a sort of a 3D, like It looks like a 3D action game when you watch a trailer, but it is just like kind of a point and click adventure type of a thing. And that game had like a similar thing where you'd be like, okay, I'm not sure like how to advance here, but you could go into the menu and there was like a tip system where you could like, if you needed a hint, you could like click on it and it would like give you some sort of thing that might help you figure out where you're supposed to go or what you're supposed to do next.
Now, that's a good feature.
And then there would be like a 20-second timer or whatever before you could click on it again and get another tip. But so that's something that I would like to see added to a game like this, but I don't think that they're going to do that. I think the OG, point and click adventure fans, they're not going to give you the tips, so you're going to have to figure it out yourself. But these are games I've heard nothing but good things about. I know people love them, and it's one of those series that I've like for years I've thought about going to play just because of how many people I've heard like talk about how much they love them. So very interesting that it's coming back.
Yeah, I wonder if it will be. I wonder what innovations they will bring to it, or if it will just be a straight nostalgia trip of like point and click, or if they will. If
do it more like third person that way.
I don't know if they're going to evolve the format in some way. I mean, it's been so long, and I feel like adventure game. Speaking of this, I mean, we can talk about this a little bit later, but I have started very initially playing Disco Elysium.
Ooh.
Which I feel like is an iteration on the point and click adventure, even though it is, isometric or whatever. But if this is isometric, that's interesting to me. I don't really know. I can't get a good feel based on the small amount of footage they showed. If it is going to be 2D like the old days, or how, like, if there's going to be a Z-axis, basically. Mm-hmm. I'm interested in this. I want to know more. I want to watch like actual gameplay.
Yeah, I feel like we will maybe get that around E3 time, you think?
Hopefully. Faux E3, Summer Games Fest.
Yeah, Summer Games Fest is... We gotta, like, adjust our mindset and call it Summer Games Fest time instead of E3
That's why I think
time.
If they could bring it back, it's because everyone is still just using this old parlance of E3 times and things like that. It's so hard to get rid of. Because it's been around for, like, so long.
Should we get into the Sony subscription service?
Yes. So Sony was like, we're going to sort of have a Game Pass, but it's going to be more confusing and more expensive. And everyone was like, okay. So PlayStation Plus Essentials is what currently exists. It is like multiplayer is available to people, and you get like 3 free game or like 2 or 3 free games a month. Then there's PS Plus Extra, which is a catalog of, they said, like 350 or 400 games that you'll have access to. Who knows what any of those games are.
But no like simultaneous release of like their first party games the way that Game Pass does.
An important distinction to make.
So this is older stuff. Yeah.
Then there's PS Plus Premium, the most expensive tier, wherein the added benefit is you get to play old games from PS2, PS1, PS3 era, which I guess is something people are interested in. I don't know. What's your take on this? It's very confusing to me that that's the added buy-in for the most expensive tier.
It seems bizarre. Like, they have an extra tier in here that they don't need, basically. Like, I don't know why they didn't follow... Because it's kind of like halfway the Nintendo model and halfway the Game Pass model, but without, like Nintendo's is cheaper. And so they went more expensive, and Game Pass has new stuff, but they did not bring the new stuff. So they like tried to sort of borrow the model a little bit like from Nintendo and from Xbox Game Pass, but without the things that make them like partially like good.
Yeah, they borrowed the bad things.
Yeah. So basically, if you do nothing, if you're already a PlayStation Plus subscriber, if you do nothing, you get PlayStation Plus Essentials, which there again, like, what the naming convention makes no sense. But like, I feel like that bottom tier should have just been the one that comes with the PlayStation 1, 2, 3, and PSP games.
100%.
Like, that's what Nintendo did. Like, they offer, if you want to subscribe to Nintendo Online, we're going to throw in, like, the classic NES and Super NES games. And I'm even okay if they just wanted to, like, throw in PS1 and PS2 and maybe PSP, and then, like, the PlayStation 3 games is lumped in with, like, the extra, like, 400 PS4 and PS5 games. Just, like, lump those all into one category. And then just wipe out the deluxe one that costs the most money altogether.
It doesn't make any... Like, who's buying that? No one is going to buy that, I feel like.
Well, and so their reasoning for not even having, like, doing the Game Pass thing of, like, our first-party stuff is going to launch, like, day and date as a game that you can play with this subscription service, their reasoning didn't even make sense to me.
What was their reasoning?
So... Jim Ryan, the PlayStation CEO, basically said that they feel like without charging money, like full price for those games upon release, they would not be able to like maintain their like the quality of release that they're doing. But at the same time, you look at Microsoft and go, well, are you saying that their games, their first party games, are not as good as what you're making? And maybe they cost less? Like, I don't understand. So either Xbox is, you know, doing Game Pass at a loss and the model does not work and we just don't know that yet. Or Sony is going to find that people are not going to sub to their service unless they put the new stuff on there. And then they will eventually add them, which I feel like is the more likely situation.
My PlayStation Plus... subscription has expired at this point. I have not renewed it this year.
Mine has as well. And
I don't know, man. I don't know why I would renew it unless it was like you get all that value add of first party games and the catalog. It's crazy to me that the Essentials is unchanged. Like, you basically don't get anything new. Yeah. It's not exciting.
You just get the online play and the like monthly free games to add, which seems a little redundant with the like 400 ones that you get.
I agree.
With the higher tier. And then
does not make a lot of sense.
And it's a little like nickel and diming your like biggest fans by making the classic games on the most expensive tier, which like who's gonna sub to that?
Well, maybe the reasoning is, like, I'm just trying to figure out what they're thinking, but maybe they're like, oh, people who like PS1 games are old dudes now. And so those people will have more money. Like, children don't care about PS1 games, and they don't have any money. But people in their, like, 30s and 40s have money, supposedly. Some of them do.
And they're willing to pay for nostalgia.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe that's what they're thinking. I think it's foolish to think that, and I think it will blow up in their face, but...
Like I said, I think they should have just had the two tiers, where the base one gets you online play and gets you, like, the classic PS1 and PS2 games, and then maybe also those, like, monthly, like, free games that they throw in. And then the higher tier should have been the 400 PS4, PS5, and then also the PS3 games. And then also they need to make it so that like the new stuff is also coming out on that day and date. Like, that's
not only is that way smarter, it is easier to understand from like a consumer's perspective.
Right. Especially now that like Nintendo has sort of established that model already. And also, like, pricing wise, it ranges from $60 a year to $120 a year.
Insane.
Versus, and granted, like, the library, I guess, of what they're offering, like, they haven't said specifically what those 400 PS4 and PS5 games are going to be. But to my knowledge, they also haven't talked about what the PS1, PS2, PS3, and PSP games are going to be. So... we don't know if they're going to do the Nintendo thing of like, here's a handful. It's going to seem like a small amount, but we're going to slowly add to it. And then it eventually will be a value add, or are they just going to have like a ton of stuff right from the get-go? Because it's going to be a tough sell to get people to pay $120 a year for like 5 PS1, 2, 3, and PSP games.
It's a good point. I mean, I like the original Ape Escape, but I'm not going to pay $120 a year to play it.
Now, actually, I don't think it's that bad a deal. If you're really wanting to play like the old games, and I think like they're all inclusive, right? If you pay for the most expensive one, you get the 400 PS4 and PS5 games and the old ones. When I think about it compared to like EA's like Origin Access Premier, which I did pay for a few years, that was $100, and I was like, okay, but if I play 2 games that EA released this year, then that makes it worth it, because in the long run I save $20 a year.
That's true.
Just by
that is a good point.
Just by playing 2 of them. However, you're not getting the new games with this, so maybe that flies out the window a little bit. But also, I guess it depends on how many of those old games you're willing to play.
Yeah. I am very this. I guess is beginning in June. I'm very interested to see the catalog. I want to scroll through that and see if there are some like must plays that I have a lot of nostalgia for that I don't already have in my collection.
Yeah, and like you said, I have let my PlayStation Plus subscription lapse, and I have not felt the need to re-up it because I don't really play online games on PlayStation anymore. And the PlayStation Plus like monthly games that they add have not been interesting to me for quite some time. I guess if I wanted to go play Bloodborne right now, I would have to re-up my subscription, because the only way I have access to that game is because I added it to my library when it was a PS Plus title.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know if this is going to make me want to resubscribe. Yeah. I think the killer app has to be adding the new games. Like, if you could subscribe to this when it goes live in June, and you could immediately play Horizon Forbidden West, and if God of War Ragnarok came out this fall and you could play it immediately on that service, I mean, that's what would get people to subscribe to it. But
I agree.
Plus, like,
confusing. We
don't know like what they're doing as far as like getting third parties involved as well. It's really going to depend on those 400 games. Like, is there anything in there that's interesting?
Yeah, like with like Hollow Knight is an example. Like any indie game, really. Like, are indie games included in this, or is it just like old PlayStation games that were PlayStation exclusives? Or like, what about like old Call of Duty games and things like that, you know?
Yeah, like how many of them are like EA Sports games that I have no interest in?
Yeah. How much is it like just like a racing game that no one has heard of that was developed in like 2005?
Yeah. It's hard to say. The fact that they're throwing in PS5 games makes it like it's possible that it could be like Returnal. I think, did they say Returnal was on here? They did confirm a couple of them, didn't they?
I don't remember. They did like a montage of like things that I guess could be included, and I think Returnal was in that montage.
Oh yeah, it says here. So GamesIndustry.biz says games like Spider-Man Miles Morales, God of War, Returnal, Mortal Kombat 11, and Death Stranding. So they do have some fairly recent ones, but also I feel like if you were interested in playing those games, you've played them already.
It's true.
Are you going to sub to a service to play a game that you probably have already played or have in your library?
Yeah, that you already own.
I mean, I haven't played the Spider-Man games, but there's a reason for that. Like, I'm not going to sub to play them specifically.
I wonder if they'll walk any of it back. I wonder if they'll see the feedback, because as far as I can tell, there's been zero positive feedback for this announcement.
Yeah.
I wonder if they'll revamp it and be like, actually, we're getting rid of one tier and just consolidating.
Yeah.
That would garner some goodwill.
My hope is they do exactly what I said that they should do. And if they do that, I would definitely consider... I guess it's going to depend on, again, the lineup of what they have available, but... I don't know. If they did consolidate those into 2 tiers, even just like as like if I was feeling nostalgic for a month, I could see doing like a 1 month thing where maybe I'd jump in and play some like PS1 or PS2 games, and then like once the mood has passed, I just unsub again. But yeah, I feel like what's going to happen is they're going to try this for a while, and they're going to see that their numbers in terms of subscriptions is just not really where they want it to be. And they're going to decide that, yeah, they're going to need to add new stuff like day and date in order to get people to subscribe to it.
I agree. Time shall tell.
Yep. You're going to have
to
wait and
discuss what we've been watching and playing?
Yeah, so I did take a break from Elden Ring for a little while to play Kirby and the Forgotten Land, which is sort of one of the more recent games that we've not had a chance to talk about on the show. And I have beaten the final boss and credits rolled, but I realize I'm not done with it yet because...
There's a post-game.
Yeah, there is a post-game, so you can load back into Waddle Dee Town, and there'll be some NPCs there that you haven't talked to yet, and... there's sort of a little bit more of a story going on there, and there's like a new area you can go to with some new levels. And yeah, I really enjoy it. I want to say it's a little bit more sort of Super Mario 3D World versus instead of being like the Super Mario Odyssey that we wanted it to be. But it's still very good. It's one of those Nintendo first-party games that if you played something like Super Mario 3D World and you enjoyed it, you're probably going to have a good time with this. It is like a pretty easy game, which I don't think is bad. It's funny. I would take damage from like a boss I was fighting, and I would be like, well, there's not really like a good dodge maneuver, which I realized later there actually is a dodge maneuver, and I just never used it, but. But I realized, you can just fly. And so I started just being able to like avoid anything by just like hovering. And I was like, oh, okay, here we go. But no, it's really enjoyable. There's like a bunch of different capture abilities that you get, and you can, find like blueprints to, sort of evolve them and get like a new form of it. And they're each, pretty interesting and more powerful than the previous one, and I think it's a very good game, and I really enjoyed it.
I haven't picked it up yet, but I'm planning on it. Like I said, I've started playing Disco Elysium a little bit, which is interesting.
Yeah, I want to hear about that.
It's a crazy game, and I think I'm having a different experience with it than other people, because I believe the special edition that came out included a ton more voice acting. I don't know how much voice acting was in the original or if it was just text-based, but it seems like everything is voice acted in this one. It's interesting. I don't know if I'm gonna... if it hasn't gotten its hooks in me yet, but again, I've only played for like 40 minutes off and on. Like, I'll just boot it up for like maybe 15 minutes. It's nice that you can save wherever. It's not one of those games where you have to like find a save point, but it's incredibly unique. And I know that's like what everyone says, but the reason it got me interested is because everyone's talking about that Norco game right now, and everyone is saying like, oh, Norco is like very similar to Disco Elysium in a lot of ways, in that it's like very good and kind of a point and click. And then I realized that Disco Elysium was like super discounted on Steam because it's like the anniversary of it or something. It was like $15 or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I picked it up and started playing it. The music is very good. It like does a really good job of dropping you into this world and story building just for like random things you see and just like interesting side notes that you have with yourself. Like if you see something, like people are your subconscious or whatever is constantly talking to you. And so if you see something that's not necessarily an emotion or something you're analyzing, it's just like something you see in the world, then like a kind of a compendium part of you comes up and talks to you. Very similar to Mass Effect, where you would find something and then you could go in and that nice British man would tell you all about it. I looked at all of those when I played Mass Effect and it was wonderful.
Yeah.
And this whole game kind of seems like that part of Mass Effect where you come upon something and it's like, oh, like this is the town you're in and this is the reason that this is this way. And like this music originated from here or whatever. It's very interesting. It's I'll play more of it today. I haven't really gotten a chance. I've been pretty busy this week, but my girlfriend is away today visiting people, and so my only goal today is to play more Disco Elysium and see if it really entrances me like it has entranced many others.
Yeah, it's a game that I've been curious about since it came out and everybody was talking about how great it was. I have not played it yet. I know it's on Switch, which seems like a good place to possibly play
I'll
that
let you
as
know.
well.
I'll hopefully next week I'll have an update as far as like how far I've progressed and how much of its hooks it has in me. But something else I want to talk about is Severance, which you have not watched, but it's on Apple. I feel like a ton more people would be talking about it if it was not on Apple TV or Apple Plus or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of like a walled garden that people aren't really engaging with. I guess Ted Lasso is like the main thing that people know about Apple, but there's a ton of stuff on there. Like since I subscribed to it, it just like all of it seems like fake television, just like stuff you would see in the background of another TV show that's like someone has produced to be a facsimile of what television is. It's very weird to look at, but there are like whole movies and TV shows that are produced and on there that exists, and I just feel like no one is talking about. But Severance is great. If it was on HBO Max, I feel like every single person would be talking about it because it's so good. It's the premise of the show. I forget if we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but Adam Scott works at this company that has developed this procedure called Severance where they put a chip in your brain, and when you go into the office, it basically flips over to another person, and so that other person just does your job. And then when you leave, it flips back to yourself. So effectively, you only ever commute to work, and then you get in an elevator, and then you're immediately getting out of the elevator. And you don't really experience work; you just experience your personal life. But
man,
the flip side of that,
I want to live in that world.
well, the flip side of that is that you have a person inside. They call it the innie. And you're the outie because you're outside the office. But there's an innie version of you that all they know is work. They never go home. They never sleep. They never really see anyone except their coworkers. And that's their entire existence. They leave for the day and then immediately return. Like they go up the elevator, but they don't ever leave the elevator. They just come back down. And so there's this whole thing. There's a subplot in the show about how these people are protesting severance because they think it's like a new version of slave labor, but you're enslaving yourself. You're enslaving this other version of yourself that you can never communicate with. It's super interesting and really weird. And the music is great, and all of the aesthetic is crazy and good. It's like based on that old like internet, what would you call that? Like an internet folk tale kind of like the back rooms, which are these like infinitely generated generic like office parks and like subway systems and like parking garages that are just empty and infinitely like go on forever, and they're just kind of in the background of the world. But it's super, super good. They had their finale this past Thursday, and I watched it last night, and it was incredibly tense and interesting, and I I don't know where this show is going, and it's just like it's the best television that I've watched, I think, in a very long time. Probably the last thing I was as into was The Expanse, which we both really like, and since then there's been TV shows that I've watched, but I have not been super invested in. But this is just something where I can't stop thinking about it. Like last week, in like the lead up to the finale, it ended on a huge cliffhanger, and I was thinking about it all week. And then I got home yesterday, and I was like, we need to watch this immediately. And it's so good. It's like it's a very, very good show, I have to say. So I highly recommend it.
Interesting. Yeah, I might try to watch this soon, just based on your recommendation. It's been a while since I've been that hooked on a show as well, so I'm definitely into that idea.
Now, I'm going to cancel my Apple Plus or Apple TV or whatever it's called because this has gotten renewed for a second season, but it probably is not going to come out for like a year. But during this time when Severance was coming out, I watched another Apple Plus show that I did not know existed called After Party, which is a thing. It was like a comedy show, which I just found to be okay. But I guess that's also getting a sequel. But it was interesting. It was like kind of a thing where it had a really good cast list, and like a murder happens, and then basically it's a thing where the detective goes to each different person that's involved, and they tell their side of the story. But each person, like the detective is like, oh, everybody's story is like a movie, so tell me your movie of what happened. So each person that tells it is like a different kind of movie. Like one of them is animated, one of them is an action movie, one of them's like a rom-com. One of them is told by a child, so it's like insane, and people are like Muppets at points. But it was cool. It's an interesting idea for a show, and I like a mystery show. I don't think it's anywhere near as good as Severance, and if you're going to look at Apple TV, that's definitely the thing to look at. But again, it's very weird. Apple TV is weird to look at. I can get it on my TV because I have an Android TV. That's like the only way I can watch it because I don't really own any Apple stuff. But just to like swipe through all of their things, it's just like there's a lot of content that I have never heard anyone discuss with like giant stars in it. There's some show with like Reese Witherspoon where she is like a news anchor or something, or maybe works at a talk show, and it's just like, this is the first I'm hearing of it. But it's been produced. I don't even know if it's a movie or a TV show, but it's weird. Like Apple TV, I guess is making.
I think I've heard of that one. Is that it's like the morning show, and it has like
maybe I think it actually is a morning show. Yes,
person that played Rachel in Friends, and like Steve Carell is in it, and
I think yes, Steve Carell is definitely in it. He was in the screenshot that I saw, but it's weird. Like I don't know what's going on, but it was very surreal for me to flip through all this stuff that I've never heard of.
I've been increasingly out of touch when it comes to like movies and TV. I've just sort of drifted away from movies and TV over the last few years and gotten just like more laser focused on like video game stuff. But like, yeah, it is weird. Like every now and then I'll hear like coworkers talk about some random show, and I'll be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I think I discovered the other day that they were talking about that morning show TV show.
That makes sense to me.
So apparently, yeah, some people have talked about it, but like, yeah, I'd never heard of this Severance show. And like Apple TV has like, and the one that everybody knows is the soccer one, but
Ted Lasso, which I watched the first episode of and I just found to be okay. I don't think that maybe I'm not charmed by Jason Sudeikis, but or like Old Town Country wisdom or whatever. I find to be I don't like hillbilly aphorisms, but Severance is definitely worth it because you get a week free. Unfortunately, you need a thing that can access Apple TV, which is I feel like another part of the problem. You can't just cast it to anything.
It's kind of like I will probably never subscribe to Amazon Luna because I don't have a device for it. Like
that's true.
It's
you don't have a Fire Stick.
It's sort of the barrier to entry. Yeah, like I'm not going to go on Amazon and buy a Fire Stick just to be able to play games on Amazon Luna. So,
but I feel like if Severance was on HBO Max or Netflix, I feel like everybody would be talking about it.
Well, and
it is like so good.
It's the kind of thing where they need to like we've talked about this for years, I feel like, but they like all these separate subscription services is just a problem. Like nobody wants to be subscribed to like 5 different like $10 a month subscription services, and like it's just too much. So you have to like remember, okay, I'm subbing to Netflix now because Stranger Things is out. Once that's over, I'm going to cancel that, and then I'm going to go sub to Apple TV for this one show, and then once I watch that, I'm going to cancel that, and then go to, like, it's too much. You need, like, kind of like cable or satellite, but where you can pick, like, which services you want to bundle. But I feel like that will never happen, because...
Yeah,
like nobody's going to be able to
have their own thing.
Yeah, and everybody wants their own thing, and nobody's going to be like, sure, I'll throw our service in with Apple and Netflix and Amazon.
It's like that old comic, that old XKCD comic, where someone is like, oh, there's like a 3-step process where it's like, hey, there are 3 competing services. There should be one service that incorporates them all.
Yeah.
And then the second part is there are now 4 competing services because someone has just created the 4th one that tries to unify them, but it's its own thing. And I feel like that is the case. Like, there's never going to be, like, Apple TV is never going to merge with HBO Max until we get super dystopian and there is only one corporation, which could happen in our lifetime. Who knows?
We are trending more towards a dystopia than ever before. So, you know.
And on that note,
you have any parting wisdom for us?
Watch Severance, everybody. Even if you don't have an Apple device, find a way to watch it because it's so good. It's only 9 episodes, and every one of them is like 45 minutes long, but it's so interesting and it enraptured me, I have to say.
And mine would be play Elden Ring, and if you have played Elden Ring, there are some interesting lore videos out there right now that you can go watch. Like, I started watching those, and
who have you been watching? Who's your go-to Elden Ring lore YouTube channel?
I don't have a go-to just yet. I like kind of picked little ones here and there. I did see, I think it was Eurogamer maybe, that started doing a series on, like,
really?
They would pick like 1 or 2 characters that were in some way connected, and they would kind of do like a 15-minute video where they would just go through, like, here's the background of these characters and here's their story and like everything that happens in the game. And it's very fascinating. And because like as I've played through some more of the quest lines and gotten deeper into the game, I'm like, I still think the quest design is bad, and I do think it needs like some of that, like you were talking about with Disco Elysium, where you just like go into the codex and like a lovely British voice comes on and like reads through it all and tells you everything you need to know.
A great feature to have.
Like, for everybody's claim that Elden Ring is superior to every other game for not giving you a quest log, I highly disagree. I think it needs a little something, like in the menu, a journal, a codex.
It needs something
to tie it together and make it easier to parse. Like, I know there's like lore in like the description of like a weapon or an armor piece you pick up, but like that's not enough. It doesn't do enough. And so definitely look up the videos to get the lore, because it actually is really interesting. The characters are interesting, and you can kind of start to see the where George R.R. Martin like was writing these characters, and like FromSoft started tying things together. So that's my parting wisdom, is look all that stuff up, because it's pretty cool. And you're not going to figure it all out from the game either.
All right, well, that'll do us.
That will do it for this week. Go ahead and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at Starside Cafe. And we'll catch you on the next one.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.